My name is Mark Tagal. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Share. All right. So this is me. I'm the senior aquaculturist for a company called IBSS. If you go and look us up on the web, you're going to find kind of like lots of technical stuff, and you're like, oh, this is like satellites and whatnot. I work for the Oceans and Coast Division. In a nutshell, companies like IBSS are great big contracting companies. They're like temp agencies for scientists. Most of our clients are federal, state, and tribal governments. We get hired out to do marine biology work when people need it. Kind of a lot of the stuff we do are outreach and education, consultations with recirculating aquaculture systems, restoration aquaculture, fish husbandry, and all the way up to production aquaculture. Um, we do a lot of communications and education stuff. If you want to find out more about those guys, you can just go to ibss.com and see, the kind of stuff they do. Where does our funding come from? Where does money for the kind of work that we do come from? It mostly comes from task order funding. So that's like if a government agency has a project they need done, they can hire us out. It comes from grants. I'm currently on 2 grants right now that I applied for and got. And then there's consultation funding. Sometimes universities say, hey, Mark, can you build this system? And I'll go up and build it for them. So how did I get to where I am today? I'm a little bit different from a lot of the aquarists that have been talking today. Um, here's my story. I started out as a high school kid. I grew up in Hawaii. I knew I wanted to be around the ocean and water. I liked fishing. I knew I wanted to do something kind of in that realm. At the same time, I also liked cooking. And so that actually becomes important later on in my career of what I was doing. And I saw someplace in the chat that people were talking about getting a second job. Be a cook someplace. You can always eat. But also, while we're on the topic, if you want to have a job where you are extremely valuable to an operation that is taking care of fish, growing fish, learn electricity, learn plumbing, learn basic carpentry, and if you have the wherewithal, get forklift certified. I've gotten into 2 jobs because I have forklift certification, and it bumped me up a whole pay grade because yeah, I can drive a forklift. So um, I started out at the University of Washington, Aquatic and Fishery Sciences. When I went there, it was just called UW School of Fisheries. I was actually the very last person to graduate from the old structure at School of Fisheries. Before I had even graduated from UW through a work study program, I started working at the Mukilteo Lab for National Marine Fisheries Service. So they're a branch of NOAA up in Seattle. Um, and while I worked with NOAA for pretty much the first half of my career, I was never an actual NOAA employee. I was always a contract worker. And so I have worked for every one of these contracting companies in the past, but now I'm an actual employee of IBSS. So contract workers usually go, say NOAA needs a scientist to look at the effects of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. They hire a contract for a certain amount of time for 2 years. When that portion of the job is up, then you're out of the job until a new contract comes along. Um, as a person with IBSS, I kind of now overlook some of our contract workers that are out there in the field. What was I doing at the Mukilteo station? I did a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that you do in the lab. There's a lot of lab work going on. I did stuff with rockfish, of course, stuff with salmonids, the Pinto abalone, with Puget Sound Restoration Fund. They used to be right. Their lab was right next to my lab up there. I've done a lot of rockfish stuff at the lab up there. I also did a lot of field research for that lab. We did a lot of the Puget Sound monitoring, forage fish monitoring, salmon moving monitoring. That was kind of like in my early career. Where it really started to gel in, though, where I kind of found my niche is when I started working with rockfish. So we were trying to hammer out the kind of early life cycle of rockfish. And this little rockfish over here, if Bree knows the one-eyed rockfish that's in the wow tank, that's one of her offspring. It's probably 15 years ago, but that was one of the offspring yellow-eye rockfish. I'm gonna go ahead and pat myself on the back right here. First person to get them from egg through metamorphosis was done at that rundown Mukilteo lab. And we, from I think our original cohort of something like 250,000 fish, we got 3 through, and that was like a really big deal.
It was a really big deal. It's legendary. Tim Carpenter and Joel Hollander tell me all about it. It's a big
Yeah,
deal. It was really
yeah.
cool.
So from doing rockfish, I kind of like, man, I really like these larval fish, the kind of the small, just trying to get them figured out. So rockfish kind of moved into forage fish. I did a lot of stuff with forage fish, with herring, with surf smelt. Hopefully in the near future, we'll be doing stuff with sand lance, just kind of hammering out that early life history of fish. In doing early life history stuff, this is where plumbing comes in good. You have to improvise a lot of systems for things that don't exist yet. So what you can see here is some of the ways we're looking at incubating surf smelt eggs. Surf smelt eggs are intertidal. So when we tried to do them like we did herring, it didn't work. All the eggs would fungus up. It just didn't work out. So we had to recreate tide in the lab. And so these are some of the early prototypes of stuff that we were doing with kind of surf smelt work and forage fish work. And so why is this work important? Well, that was really interesting to NOAA's toxicology group. Through the NOAA's Ecotox group and through Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, we looked at a lot of oil spill response stuff and how it affects forage fish. Forage fish are an important indicator species around Puget Sound. From forage fish, I specifically focused in on surf smelt. I'm going to do another pat myself on the back. Incubation of or beach fertilization of surf smelt with a 95% fertilization success rate. So from that, they were able to do a bunch of surf smelt monitoring. They're able to use the eggs as an indicator for pollution impacts. And so a lot of my fish husbandry work was directly tied to ecotoxicology. I was important to the ecotox team because those guys aren't fish husbandry people. So they know how to look at poison and how to look at things that mess up fish. But I was able to provide them with kind of like, this is what your controls should look like. And I did that from probably 1997 to 2014. I wanted to go back home to Hawaii. You saw like I was into cooking later. So I went to the exact other end to it and I went full production aquaculture. So I was the hatchery manager at Blue Ocean Mariculture, where we grow Seriola rivoliana. It's marketed as Hawaiian kampachi. If you ever go to a sushi restaurant and you eat hamachi or yellowtail, that's the fish. It's not necessarily coming from Hawaii, but it's in the same genus. When I was over there at the hatchery, I was in charge of, again, early life rearing, live feeds, and larval nutrition. So we built a facility that we could grow rotifers, enough rotifers to handle the cohorts they were putting offshore. Those green tanks that you see there, A1 and A3, there was a series of those where we would harvest 9 billion rotifers a day and have enough to do the same thing the next day for 60 days in a row. And that was to get one cohort out. So this went from kind of small scale live feeds production to massive live feeds production. I did that for a couple of years with those guys, putting fish offshore when the Northwest was calling me back. A bunch of other factors were bringing me back here. And so I came back to Washington, where and this is about where I started working for IBSS. And I went back to forage fish. And this is actually how I met Emily. We were doing some forage fish stuff. And it's still for the toxicology group, but we're also doing it for UW Genetics, And then just for some forage fish outreach stuff that we want to get into through IBSS, as I was saying, we do a lot of kind of aquaculture stuff. We work with the U.S. Geological Survey, and we do some sablefish work with the Sklallam tribe, where we're looking at different aspects of culturing that fish. We do a lot of work with shellfish people. That gets us exposure to some really high-end shellfish growing facilities. And then some of the consulting work that I was talking about, Western Washington University asked me to help them design and build a small recirculating system to hold salmonids. Those salmonids ultimately are used for toxicology studies. So that's a lot of the focus of the stuff that I'm doing. But the stuff that interests me most right now, because they're grants that I get to go after myself, are these three things. I got a grant to study the terroir of seafood, and this is where being a chef kind of comes into it. Where we got a grant to do public outreach, and we talk about the different factors that influence the way ocean farm seafood taste. We have another program called Rockfish Rangers, which is more outreach, and we talk about rockfish to the general public. And a new one that's just starting up is Forage Fish Friends, where we want to do similar to what we do with rockfish, but get back into talking about forage fish, smelt, herring, hopefully sand lance. So with the terroir of seafood is funded by a grant from EE Blue and NAAE, which are both NOAA programs. Through that one, we partner up with informal learning institutions like Mass Center, with culinary colleges, with local aquariums, and we talk about seafood. Rockfish Rangers, kind of the same thing. We're partnered up with PDZA at the moment on this one. One of the things we're looking at is the larval rearing stage of rockfish in alternative tanks. I can grow rockfish all day long in a 7-ton tank. We want to grow them in smaller, the chrysal tanks that people grow jellyfish in. You can grow them in smaller tanks, then you can do replications on them, and you can kind of get some better science data behind it. And then, of course, forage fish stuff. This one is just starting out, but hopefully in the next year, if federal grants get sorted out, we'll be looking at more kind of outreach stuff with talking about forage fish. As far as there's some people on here, kind of wanting to break into kind of fisheries, aquaculture, fish husbandry. IBSS has a program. They have two programs right now. One of them, the PDMP, it's the short and simple of it is you get to go pick up garbage. The cool part of it is you get to go pick up garbage on remote Hawaiian islands. You leave from Oahu, you go out to, I think, French Frigate Shoals, Necker, Nihoa, all these tiny atolls, and you pick up marine debris. You rescue turtles, you hang out with little frigate birds. It is the coolest thing you will ever do. It's probably unbelievably hard because I think last year they picked up something like, what was it, 400,000 pounds of derelict trash in 2 weeks. So it's a really it's a taxing job, but if you send me your resume, I know that they were hiring for the next cruise to go out there. So there's my pitch to steal you away from working in aquariums. But yeah, so that's kind of me in a nutshell. Definitely send me an email if you have any questions about anything that we've done or what we're doing. We're kind of always, one of our missions as a B Corps is to kind of connect with people just starting out in their careers. We offering mentorship or anything like that. So anyway, thanks for listening. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'm going to stop sharing.